Hey guys, Fergus here with weathermapping.com. In today's map, we're looking at forecast total precipitation as a percentage of normal for the next 15 days, February 11th through the 25th, across South America, the Amazon Basin, Northern Tier, and the Southern Cone. On these maps, the brown indicates below normal precipitation, while the greens and teals indicate above normal precipitation. So first, let's explain the metric itself. What is percentage of normal precipitation? Well, this compares the forecast total over the period that we're looking at compared to what's typical for the same date and location. The calculation is pretty straightforward. Percentage of normal equals forecast total divided by normal total multiplied by 100. So let's give a real world example. If a location normally gets 80 millimeters in a 15-day window and the forecast is 120, that's 120 divided by 80 multiplied by 100, which is 150% of normal. If it's forecasted to get 40 millimeters instead, that's 50% of normal. This metric matters because it accounts for how different climates behave. 50 millimeters could be extremely wet in a semi-arid region, but not particularly noticeable in kind of core Amazon wet season. Percentage of normal puts anomalies into context, and it helps us quickly flag where upcoming patterns lean towards a flood risk, saturated soil, versus kind of drier, higher fire weather potential and stress on agriculture and water supply. It's also useful seasonally. February is already a high precipitation time in much of tropical South America, so 150 to 300% signals a really meaningful kind of amplification of what is already a wet baseline. Let's look at the large scale pattern first. Across the Amazon Basin, northern areas, we're seeing a dominant signal that's very wet across the northwest quadrant, spanning Colombia into northern Brazil, parts of Venezuela. Widespread areas in that 150 to 200% range, localized pockets even higher. In contrast, a broad swath of central and eastern Amazon areas into parts of interior Brazil trend near normal to modestly below normal, generally around that 80 to 110% range, with kind of drier pockets closer to that 60 to 80%. In the south, the big picture is a sharp west-east split. Chile and the immediate lee of the Andes tend strongly below normal, with an extensive 20 to 50% shading from the north down through the central section, kind of moving east into northern Argentina, Paraguay, and southern Brazil. And the pattern flips to above normal, nearly between kind of 110 170% of normal, with an embedded maxima. Farther south into Patagonia, the signals are more mixed, with near normal interior and some coastal and localized kind of wet spots. So let's break this down by region. Firstly, we'll start with the Amazon Basin and northern South America. Colombia and the far northwest Amazon really stand out as a wet zone. Around the Colombia, Venezuela, northern Brazil corridor, we have a large area running well above normal, broadly 170 to 250%, with a kind of embedded core that's pushing into that 300% category. Huge amounts of rainfall. Practical takeaway here is there's sustained precipitation, repeated storm events, rounds of convection, especially on that north and western sides of the basin. Along Ecuador and northern Peru, along the western edge, kind of near Ecuador and down towards that Peruvian side, the map is showing a corridor that trends above normal, often 120 to 170%, with some sharper gradients as you move inland versus along those kind of coastal and foothill transition areas. Locally, locations near Lima, Trujillo sit close to that west side signal, overall leaning wetter than typical in nearby zones, though not uniformly extreme kind of everywhere. Looking at the central Amazon, sort of interior Brazil, from the mid-basin through to much of interior Brazil, we're kind of settling on that near normal, between 90 and 110% of normal, with some kind of pockets slipping into the 80s. Kind of suggests that wet season is continuing, but it's not really necessarily with persistent amplification in that core interior. For northeastern Brazil, kind of the northern coast, here the pattern is mixed. There are kind of more notable below normal pockets with some areas around 60 to 80%, some isolated spots kind of even lower. That's the part of the map where that dry shading is most apparent on that northern tier outside the wet northwest kind of core. Looking at southeast Brazil, a clear wet signal shows up over parts of southeast Brazil with broad zones around that 130 to 190% of normal range. Some even going over about 200% or above. This isn't just a bit wetter. It kind of suggests that there's going to be meaningful and multiple rain events over the next 15-day period, with a gradient back towards near normal as you move away from this core. Moving southwards into the southern cone, Chile, including kind of Santiago and then farther south, the west side is decisively drier. Near Santiago and extending southwards, that shading sits broadly in that 20 to 40% range. If you go farther south, Valdivia, it kind of trends extremely less even at times, but less than near Santiago, but it's still kind of featuring below normal with kind of some sharp transition zones where the coastal influences and the terrain intersect. The western and central Argentina, the lee of the Andes, just east of Chile into Argentina's western provinces, that dry anomaly is expanding with kind of many areas in the 30 to 50% range with some lower pockets. This is a kind of classic rain shadow favored side effect in this setup, and we see the map's gradient suggesting the driest corridor is anchored closer to the Andes before it starts easing up eastwards. Looking at Paraguay, Uruguay, kind of northern Argentina, southern Brazil, that precipitation pattern is shifting to above normal. We're commonly seeing 110 to 150% of normal, with localized areas up to 170 or 190. Uruguay and kind of the adjacent parts of northeastern Argentina look close to near normal, to kind of modestly below normal, generally around that 60 to 90% range, with some tighter transition zones to the wetter north. Patagonia in the far south looks relatively balanced. Large areas kind of hover near normal, but there are some kind of wet pockets on that Atlantic side that push into 130 to kind of 170 sort of category. So what's the context and the implications? Well, the pattern matters because it concentrates risk at both ends. In the northwest Amazon, kind of repeat above normal rainfall favors rising rivers, saturated soils, higher landslide risks along kind of terrain of foothill regions. And then in the southern cone, that kind of persistent dryness along Chile and the Andean Lee raises kind of concerns for water supply, some agricultural timing. There may be issues here, and some potential fire risks as well. While the weather signal in southern Brazil and Paraguay can support crops, it does kind of also increase the chance of localized flooding and kind of transport disruption if we see some storms clustering. So there may be some logistical issues. If you like this video and you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe to the Weather Mapping YouTube channel. And I'll see you on the next one. Laters.